Welcome to part 4 of a 4-part series that has been prepared for citizens considering running as a candidate for election in an Alberta municipality or school division. Part 4 focuses on what you need to know about the processes for being elected to your local council or school board. This webinar was updated in July 2025 to reflect recent amendments to the Local Authorities Election Act that came into effect on May 15, 2025. Please ensure you refer to the latest version of the LAEA when reviewing local election rules. This series is meant to be thought-provoking and provide you with a broad overview of municipal government, the different roles in a municipality, what will be expected of you as a member of council, and the processes for running for council. It is important to remember that these videos are not a substitution for the legislation that contains election requirements. It is the candidate's responsibility to ensure they meet the legislative requirements and deadlines for running for council. To assist in meeting those responsibilities, you can contact your local municipal office, review municipal election information on alberta.ca, and review the legislative requirements in the Local Authorities Election Act and the Municipal Government Act. This session will explore the legislative requirements for candidate eligibility, the nomination process, and campaign finance and disclosure. To be eligible to become a nominated candidate, you must be at least 18 years of age on nomination day, a Canadian citizen, and you must have been a resident of the local jurisdiction for the 6 consecutive months immediately preceding nomination day. In a municipality or school division with a ward system, other than a city, you must be a resident of the ward or the electoral division in which you intend to run for the 6 consecutive months immediately preceding nomination day. In a city with a ward system, it is required that you have been a resident of the city for 6 months immediately preceding nomination day, not necessarily the ward in which you wish to run. Prospective candidates must not be otherwise ineligible or disqualified from nomination according to Section 22 of the Local Authorities Election Act, LAEA for short. This section includes a long list of circumstances that would make a person ineligible to run, such as owing tax arrears to the municipality of over $50, or having previously failed to comply with certain campaign finance and disclosure requirements. It is a good idea to thoroughly review this section of the LAEA before taking steps to be nominated. In summer villages, a person may be nominated for a summer village council if they are eligible to vote by being over 18 years of age, a Canadian citizen, and living in Alberta and the local jurisdiction and ward, if any, on election day. Individuals can also be eligible to run for a summer village council if they are over 18, a Canadian citizen, and named on a certificate of title as the person who owns property in the summer village, or if they are over 18, a Canadian citizen, and are a spouse or adult interdependent partner of a person named on the certificate of title as an owner. The person is not required to be a resident of the summer village in order to be a candidate, but must be entitled to vote in the election and have been a resident of Alberta for the 12 consecutive months preceding election day. As in all other municipalities, candidates for summer villages must not otherwise be ineligible according to Section 22 of the LAEA. For the 2025 general election for all municipalities except summer villages, nomination day is Monday, September 22nd. However, prospective candidates could register their intent to be nominated any time after October 31st, 2024. Registration allows candidates to accept campaign contributions and incur campaign expenses. This registration process is new for this election, so prospective candidates may want to check with their local jurisdictions about the form the written notice should take. To be registered, individuals will need to provide the full name, address, and contact information of the individual, the address of the place or places where records are maintained, and of the place to which communications may be sent. the names and addresses of the financial institutions to be used as depositories for campaign contributions, and the names of the signing authorities for each financial institution to be used for campaign contributions. Local jurisdictions must maintain a register of prospective candidates and make it publicly available on their website, with certain personal information redacted. For individuals to be formally nominated, the registration process must first be completed, plus the nomination paper and candidate's acceptance, which is Form 4, and the candidate information form, which is Form 5, must be submitted to the local jurisdiction starting January 1, 2025, and up until 12 noon on September 22, 2025. In the case of summer villages, the council is required to set an election day in the months of June, July, and August, and nomination day will be 4 weeks prior to election at the times and location provided for through council resolution. The local jurisdiction may provide all required forms in the nomination package, or they are available on alberta.ca. Any questions about filling out the forms accurately can be directed to the jurisdiction's returning officer or Municipal Affairs Advisory. Generally, the nomination paper must be signed by at least 5 voters eligible to vote in the election. The signatures collected must be those of people who are residents in the local jurisdiction and the ward, if any, on the date of signing the nomination, and include the voter's name, address, which is street address or legal description of the residence, and their signature. A local jurisdiction may have passed a bylaw increasing the number of signatures required, so it's a good idea to contact them to confirm their requirements. A local jurisdiction may also require a nomination deposit to accompany the nomination form, as set out in a bylaw. The maximum amount a deposit can be is $1,000 for jurisdictions with populations of more than 10,000 and $100 for all others. The deposit can be paid in cash, certified check, money order, e-transfer, or by debit card or credit card. It's a good idea to check with the local jurisdiction about which of these methods of payment they are equipped to accept. Your deposit will be returned to you if you are elected, get at least 1/2 the number of votes of the person elected to office with the least number of votes, or withdraw as a candidate within 24 hours after the close of nominations. New for the 2025 election is the ability of local jurisdictions to pass a bylaw requiring candidates to include a criminal record check with their nomination papers. Local jurisdictions will include this information in the nomination package if it is applicable. The candidate's acceptance on the second page of Form 4 must be sworn or affirmed by the prospective candidate by a commissioner for oaths. This acceptance involves the person swearing or affirming that the person is eligible to be nominated, will accept the office if elected, and abide by the code of conduct. The electors that sign their paper are eligible to do so, and that they have read a list of certain sections of the LAEA. The acceptance must be sworn or affirmed in front of a commissioner for oaths, a service which the jurisdiction may be able to provide, or they may be able to share information regarding who the commissioner for oaths are in the area. Nominations shall be submitted to the returning officer or their designate at any time during the nomination period. It is best that nomination forms are delivered in person. However, anyone may submit a candidate's nomination paper on their behalf. If a candidate is unable to submit their nomination paper themselves, they should ensure that the forms are fully completed prior to filing them with the returning officer, because as a candidate, it is their responsibility for ensuring that their forms meet all the requirements for filing under Section 27 of the Local Authorities Election Act. A returning officer can reject a nomination form for the following reasons. First, it is not completed in the prescribed form, or it is not signed by at least the minimum number of persons required to sign the nomination. It is not sworn or affirmed by the person nominated. It is not accompanied by a deposit, if one is required by bylaw. Or it is not accompanied by a criminal record check, if required by bylaw. It is recommended that candidates submit their papers well in advance of the deadline of noon on September 22, 2025, in the event there are insufficiencies that must be addressed. Candidates may withdraw their nomination form at any time during the nomination period and up to 24 hours, or for Summer Village, up to 48 hours after the close of the nomination period. If candidates choose to withdraw, they must provide written notice to the returning officer. The intent of this webinar is not to cover all the information related to election finance and contributions rules, but to highlight the most important areas and point prospective candidates to recommended resources. As there have been many changes to election finance and contribution rules for this election, candidates must carefully read and understand Part 5.1 of the Local Authorities Election Act. Please ensure you refer to the May 15, 2025 version of this Act. New for the 2025 election are the local political parties and slates regulation, which applies only to the cities of Edmonton and Calgary, and the expense limits regulation, which applies to all municipal candidates, but not to school trustee candidates. This regulation was amended in July of 2025. A campaign financing fact sheet and a candidate's guide running for municipal office in Alberta can be viewed at alberta.ca. Failure to comply with these fairly complex rules can result in offenses and fines, and can also lead to a candidate's disqualification or future eligibility to run in future elections. So please take the time to become familiar with them and get independent legal advice if necessary. There are no standards or legislative requirements for campaigning when it comes to municipal and school board elections. However, candidates should ensure they follow their local jurisdiction's election bylaw, as well as bylaws and provincial guidelines that may restrict the placement and use of campaign signs and advertising in public spaces. Candidates are encouraged to contact their municipal office or speak to the returning officer for more information about local rules. Any campaign activities that involve accepting campaign contributions or incurring campaign expenses cannot be done until a prospective candidate has given written notice of their intent to be nominated. Contact the local jurisdiction to determine the form this written notice must take. At advance votes or on election day, candidates are prohibited from soliciting votes or placing campaign advertising in voting stations or within the boundaries of land on which a voting station is situated. Only one of a candidate, their official agent, or their scrutineer may attend a voting station at a time to silently observe the election proceedings. The LEA defines a campaign contribution as any money, personal property, real property, or service that is provided to or for the benefit of a candidate's election campaign or a local political party without fair market value compensation from that candidate or local political party, but does not include a service provided by an individual who voluntarily performs the services and receives no compensation, directly or indirectly, in relation to the services or time spent providing the services. The value of a contribution, other than money, provided to a candidate or a local political party is the fair market value of the contribution at the time it is provided. If any personal property, real property, or service, or the use of personal property or real property is provided to a candidate or a local political party for a price that is less than the fair market value at the time it is provided, the amount by which the value exceeds the price is considered a contribution. Also, the use of goods in a second or subsequent election is considered a non-monetary contribution. A candidate's contributions to their own campaign are also considered campaign contributions for the purposes of the legislation. The LEA restricts who can contribute to candidates in local elections. Only individuals ordinarily resident in Alberta and Alberta trade unions and employee organizations may make contributions to a candidate. Certain corporations that carry on business in Alberta are now eligible to make campaign contributions as well. Section 147.1, subsection 1, subsection F, sets out a list of other prohibited organizations, such as municipalities and Métis settlements. Prospective candidates should review the full list in this section before starting to accept contributions. The LAEA also limits the amount of campaign contributions individuals and other entities may make. In a calendar year during the campaign period of a general election, contributions made by an individual ordinarily resident in Alberta shall not exceed $5,000 in the aggregate, which means in total, to all candidates in a local jurisdiction. Contributions by a corporation other than a prohibited organization, by an Alberta trade union, or by an Alberta employee organization shall not exceed $5,000 in the aggregate to all candidates for election during the 4-year campaign period. Contribution limits also apply to self-funded campaigns. A candidate may contribute up to and including $10,000 to their own campaign. Excluded from the $10,000 would be any amounts that the candidate is reimbursed from the campaign account if it is reimbursed before the end of the campaign period and the funds were used to pay for campaign expenses. Before making a contribution under this Act, a prospective contributor is responsible for ensuring that the contributor is not prohibited from making a contribution and is not making a contribution that is in excess of the contribution limits. Every candidate and every person acting on behalf of a candidate is required to make every reasonable effort to advise prospective contributors of campaign finance rules. Throughout the duration of the campaign, receipts must be issued for every contribution received, including non-monetary contributions such as goods and services. If a contribution is in excess of $50, the contributor's name and address and the amount of the contribution must be recorded because it is required to be included with the campaign disclosure statements. However, these receipts cannot be used by contributors for income tax purposes. A candidate must open a bank account in the name of the candidate or in the name of the campaign at the time when the notice of intent is submitted under Section 147.22, or as soon as possible after the amount of contributions from any person or persons exceeds $1,000 in the aggregate, including any money paid by the candidate out of their own funds. Money in that account must then only be used for the payment of campaign expenses. A campaign expense means any expense incurred or non-monetary contribution received by a candidate, local political party, or slate to the extent that the property or service that the expense was incurred for, or that was received as a non-monetary contribution, is used to directly promote or oppose a candidate, local political party, or slate during a campaign period, and includes an expense incurred for or a non-monetary contribution in relation to 1. The production of advertising or promotional material, 2. The distribution, broadcast, or publication of advertising or promotional material in any media or by any other means during a campaign period, including by the use of a capital asset, 3. The payment of remuneration and expenses to or on behalf of a person for the person's services as a chief financial officer or in any other capacity, 4. Securing a meeting place, 5. The conduct of election surveys or other surveys or research during a campaign period, or 6. The production of a review engagement if contributions exceed $50,000. New for 2025, an expense limit regulation has been put in place by ministerial order. This regulation sets limits on campaign expenses made by candidates for chief elected official, which is mayor or reeve, and for councillors in each year of the 4-year election cycle. No campaign expenses can be made in the first and second years of the campaign period before a general election. They can only be made in the third and fourth years. This regulation does not apply to candidates for school trustee. Please note that the expense regulation was recently amended to state that in respect of the 2025 election, the number of persons residing in an area at the start of the campaign period is to be determined using the 2024 Municipal Affairs Population List available on the Open Alberta website. In an election year, if elected at large, candidates for the chief elected official, otherwise known as mayor or reeve, and councillor can incur campaign expenses up to $1 per resident or $20,000, whichever is greater. If elected by a ward, candidates for councillor may incur campaign expenses up to $1 per resident based on the average population across all wards in the municipality, or $20,000, whichever is greater. These limits apply to any campaign expenses incurred between January 1 and December 31 of 2025. In the year prior to the election year, the campaign expense limits are 50% lower. The limits are 50 cents per person based on the population of the municipality, or $10,000, whichever is greater, for mayoral and councillor candidates elected at large. For councillors of a ward, it is 50 cents per person based on the average population of the ward, or $10,000, whichever is greater. These limits will apply to any campaign expenses incurred in November and December of 2024. For all candidates that accept campaign contributions, Section 147.4 of the LAEA requires they file a campaign disclosure statement, which is Form 26, by March 1st annually. Please note that candidates who self-fund their own campaigns are still required to file this disclosure statement under Section 147.4 of the LAEA. As such, candidates who accepted contributions in November and December of 2024 were required to file their disclosure statement by March 1st of 2025. Newly added is a requirement for candidates to disclose contributions accepted between January 1st and July 31st of 2025. This must be done by September 30th of 2025. For the total amount of contributions received in 2025, the disclosure must be filed by March 1st of 2026. This disclosure statement identifies contribution totals and a list of contributors for donations greater than $50, contributions received at campaign fundraising functions, campaign expense totals and an itemized expense report, the amount of a candidate's contributions to their own campaign, and the resulting amount of the campaign surplus or deficit. Prospective candidates are encouraged to review this section of the LAEA, as well as the entire part of the Act that addresses election finances and contributions disclosure. It may be necessary to seek legal advice if there is an uncertainty about the interpretation of the current provisions in effect. Rules are in place governing the finances and accountability of third parties that advertise to promote or oppose the election of a candidate, or to take a position on an issue that is the subject of a vote on a bylaw or question, during the election period from May 1st to the close of voting stations on Election Day in the year of an election. Third parties can be eligible individuals, corporations, and groups other than a candidate. There can be no collusion between third-party advertisers and candidates. Prospective third-party advertisers are encouraged to review Part 8 of the LAEA and the Expense Limits Regulation for more information on eligibility, registration with the local jurisdiction, and contribution and expense limits and disclosure requirements. For the municipal election scheduled for October 20th, 2025, local political parties and slates of candidates may only register in the cities of Edmonton and Calgary. Local political parties and slates must not be affiliated with any provincial or federal political party. A prospective local political party or slate will not be registered if its proposed name or abbreviation resembles the name of a political party at the provincial, federal, or local level. Provincial and federal political parties are also prohibited from donating to local political parties. Local political parties will not be permitted for school board trustee elections. Candidates in these cities are encouraged to review the local political parties and slates regulation and the associated fact sheet for more information on the application process and the relevant contribution and expense limits. This is a list of some of the key dates for the 2025 general election for municipalities and school divisions. Please see the candidates guide available on alberta.ca for a more fulsome list. Elections in summer villages are held during the months of June, July, and August, so timelines vary accordingly. For additional resources on local governance, the role of council and administration, and local election requirements, please contact your municipality or view the following resources available online: the Local Authorities Election Act, the Municipal Government Act, the Municipal Government Resources webpage, a Candidate's Guide, Running for Municipal Office in Alberta. This last document was updated as of July 2025. Other resources include the Municipal Affairs Elections Overview webpage, the School Board Elections Guide, the Rural Municipalities website, and the Alberta Municipalities website. Thank you for watching part 4 of this 4-part series. Please contact Municipal Advisory if you require more information. You can find the other videos in this series on alberta.ca.